Can the 76ers win an NBA championship within the next 5 seasons? Let's get into this. Quickly before we get the video started, if you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more NBA content just like this one, hit that subscribe button and that post notification bell. Anyways, back to the video. Over the past 5 or 6 years, the Philadelphia 76ers have taken a very different approach than a lot of different NBA teams. Instead of trying to win a few NBA seasons when they knew they weren't going to win an NBA championship, the Sixers actually decided to lose on purpose and lose as many games on purpose as they potentially could have to get a high draft pick. And of course, it definitely did pay off. They were able to draft Joel Embiid, and also they were able to draft Ben Simmons #1 overall, and now they have a very nice young core going forward. Both guys they drafted, both Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, definitely flash a ton of talent. Joel Embiid a little more than Ben Simmons, but both of those guys have proven to be very good players in this league. I would say probably Joel Embiid is clearly a superstar in this league and one of the best players we have in the NBA, probably the best center we have in the NBA. And Ben Simmons, although his draft stock is a lot lower now than it was before, I still personally think that this guy has the potential to be an all-star and maybe even a little bit more than that going forward. But there definitely have been some issues between both Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid in terms of their chemistry on the court. There was definitely a few seasons in the past where a lot of people thought the Sixers should at the very least compete for an NBA championship, and it seems that each and every season the Sixers are good enough and talented enough to actually make it to the playoffs and be a pretty high seed once they get to the playoffs. But the issue with the Sixers is they're only able to win maybe a playoff series, maybe 2 playoff series, but after that they kind of stall out and are just not able to do much more after that. And that's the real big issue with the Sixers, just the inability and incapability of actually doing anything meaningful once they get to the playoffs. Because at the beginning it was very important for the Sixers team to prove they could make it to the playoffs with a core of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, but at this point it's clear that they're talented enough and good enough to actually make the playoffs. Now the next step would be to actually do something once you get to the playoffs and win more than just 1, maybe 2 series, actually try to compete for an NBA championship. And I think the Philadelphia 76ers have finally realized that either Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid have to go at this point, and they're not working well together. And I think obviously out of those 2 guys you're definitely going to pick Ben Simmons to trade. Now I already made a few videos on this topic, check those videos out if you haven't seen them, but at this point it seems like the Philadelphia 76ers definitely do want to trade Ben Simmons at this point, and it also seems like Ben Simmons have already made a few comments about it, that Ben Simmons also wants to get traded from the Sixers, so there's definitely mutual interest to actually split. But the issue is the Sixers are asking way too much for Ben Simmons. They're asking for a price of around 3 first-round picks and really good players. They're asking for a price that would be fair if Ben Simmons was at the top of his game. But currently Ben Simmons' trade value is the lowest it's ever been, especially since that playoff performance. So the Sixers really have to look themselves in the mirror and realize they're not going to get the trade offer that they're asking for. Even when Ben Simmons was at the top of his game a few seasons ago and everybody loved Ben Simmons and loved what he was actually able to do, I still think it would have been kind of tough to get the trade offer that they're asking for. But now especially the fact that Ben Simmons' trade value is extremely low based on how he played in the playoffs and probably even the entire season last year, it's basically impossible to make that trade. And now there even becomes more issues that arise by not trading Ben Simmons, because if Ben Simmons is still on the roster going into next season and actually plays for the Sixers next season, there's going to be a big issue, because of course at that point Ben Simmons knows that the Sixers don't want him on the team and don't think he has the talent it takes to really win an NBA championship, and also the Sixers know that Ben Simmons doesn't want to play for them. So why would Ben Simmons even play for their organization? He might just completely sit out until he gets traded, and then at that point you really tie the Sixers' hands, because now they absolutely have to trade you, and they're going to get even less trade value than they were going to get if they just traded you right now during the offseason. So now that's another huge issue. But let's say another case scenario, Ben Simmons doesn't sit out and actually plays for the Sixers. He might be completely unfocused as well, because he knows in the back of his head that he can get traded at any moment, and the Sixers don't necessarily want him to be on the roster. So why would he completely play his heart out when he knows the Sixers don't even want him anyway? And then they could create an issue in the locker room. There could be so many different issues caused by if the Sixers do actually end up keeping Ben Simmons on the team. So at this point I really think it's very, very crucial for the Sixers to actually trade Ben Simmons. There's just so many headaches if he actually were to stay here, and I think you can't really move on to whatever you're trying to do next without Ben Simmons if of course you don't trade Ben Simmons. I don't think you're going to win a championship with this team of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. I think they tried it too many years after years, and it never worked out. I think it's time to change something up, and if you don't trade Ben Simmons you can never move on to that next stage. But we'll see what happens with the Sixers and Ben Simmons. Maybe Ben Simmons completely demands a trade, or else he'll sit out the season, and maybe that will put a lot more pressure on the Sixers to actually trade him. But I think he should have been traded already to this point, but the Sixers still do have some time before the NBA season starts to actually trade Ben Simmons, so we'll see what happens with that. But now let's get to the question of the video, which is, do I think personally the Philadelphia 76ers could win an NBA championship within the next 5 seasons? For the sake of the video, I'm going to assume Ben Simmons is not on the roster and is traded by the time the NBA season starts. But when you actually look at the Sixers roster, they definitely have a pretty talented one. Of course, you talk about Joel Embiid, who's amazing, a superstar, probably the best center in the NBA. Maybe you could say Anthony Davis if you consider him a center, or maybe you could say Jokic. But in my opinion, I think Joel Embiid is probably one of the best centers, if not the best center in the NBA. Then you look around the other parts of the roster, they have some smaller guys, but pretty nice young players like Seth Curry. I think he's a pretty good player. Tobias Harris, I think he's a very good player as well going forward. They just brought in Andre Drummond, which is a little interesting, backing up Joel Embiid, but I still think Andre Drummond is a pretty decent player in the league. And they have some other guys, and if they were to trade Ben Simmons, of course you would assume they're going to bring in some draft picks and some young players to add up onto this team. So the Sixers definitely do have some talent going forward. The biggest thing I think for the Sixers in order to win an NBA championship is to have great coaching. Now, Doc Rivers has definitely been a pretty good coach in the regular season, but he's definitely had his issues when it came down to the playoffs. So that's something that he definitely needs to fix up. But another thing that I think is a pretty big factor in terms of if the Sixers can win an NBA championship within the next 5 seasons is chemistry. A big reason why Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid didn't work is first, of course, their play styles, because Joel Embiid can hit threes, but he does a lot of his work in the paint, and the fact that Ben Simmons can't shoot whatsoever, his defender would just double team Joel Embiid in the paint, so it definitely made Embiid's life a lot more difficult. But besides that, they didn't necessarily have great chemistry together, so that was a big factor, in my opinion, for the reason why they never really worked out that well. So definitely going forward, the Sixers definitely have to have a better chemistry to win an NBA championship. But also, I would probably say this team needs one more star. You have Tobias Harris, who I think is at the very least an all-star level player. He's a great scorer. You have a Joel Embiid, who's an absolute superstar. But I think you need one more guy on that team to really cement this Sixers team as a true NBA championship contender within the next 5 seasons. Another key for the Sixers, I think, is the way they actually evaluate talent and which players they actually draft going forward. Similar to any other team, the Sixers need to actually make use of the draft picks that they do have. Maybe they get some draft picks from the Ben Simmons trade, maybe they use the draft picks that they already have, but either way, they really need to make use of these players and really draft the right players in order to truly compete and truly be good and actually contend for an NBA championship going forward. Talent evaluation and actually finding the right player and drafting the right player in the draft, no matter which pick you actually end up having, is probably the most important thing you can do as an organization, and the Sixers need to nail that. Now, another important thing for the Sixers is actually to do well in free agency. Find the right players that they can bring in, maybe try to bring in a star or a superstar if you're actually able to, and the complementary players that you end up signing during the offseason, make sure they're the right players and you sign them for the right prices so you can bring in more players the following season and really have some cap flexibility going forward. That's also a very important thing for the Sixers going forward. But if the Sixers can do everything that I mentioned in this video, I think the Sixers definitely have enough talent to win an NBA championship. It would just be up to them to actually win one. But at this current moment, if I have to give my guess, if the Sixers would win an NBA championship within the next 5 seasons, at this point I would have to say I don't think so. But with that being said, I do think they have enough talent to, and I could see them winning one if they make some changes. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you guys think this Philadelphia 76ers team could win an NBA championship within the next 5 seasons, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.